Blog Talk Radio.
The New York Times calls it anti-feminist. CBS News calls it victim blaming. Feminists from around the world call it names you would never repeat in front of your children. TheVoiceForMen.com, a website for men, about men's issues, and a growing legion of men and women fed up with lies and corruption are calling it the de facto online source for news and information for men. VoiceForMen.com is the flagship of the men's rights movement. Much more than just a website, it's a straightforward reporting and analysis with no apologies. It is a growing media phenomenon, the birthplace of a Voice for Men radio online, and it is spreading a message of hope for men who thought there was nowhere to turn. If you have ever thought there was something wrong in the world between men and women, but you were afraid to say anything about it, come visit avoiceformen.com and find out what truth in action sounds like.
Domestic violence is not a gendered issue. It simply is not. Men and children are its victims about as often as women. And the dirty secret is most domestic violence between adults is mutual. On this show, we'll be exploring the intimate, painful, and vitally important topic of abuse within the family. We'll be sharing our perspectives and your own. We invite you to call in and discuss your views and experiences on the subject. Anyone of any age, sex, sexual orientation, or religious background is invited to call in to talk. We may not get to everyone, but we will do our best within the show's allotted time, and we plan on being here regularly. Before we begin, I thought I'd tell you about our show host. Erin Pizzey was born in 1939 in China while her father was stationed there as a member of the British Foreign Office, along with her mother and siblings. After being captured by the Japanese, Erin left China in 1942 and lived in the Middle East prior to her arrival in England in 1946. In 1971, Erin opened the first women's refuge, specifically to help female victims of domestic violence and their children. Although what she found there, and what decades of research has shown since then, more than half the women in her shelter were violent people themselves. Over the years, she tried to also create resources and safe spaces for men, but met with a lot of indifference and even hostility toward men suffering in this area. But it's a passion she continues to hold to this day, for men, for women, and especially for their children. Erin is the author of Scream Quietly or the Neighbors Will Hear, the first internationally recognized popular book on domestic violence, first published in 1974. That book, along with newspaper, magazine, and television stories to report on her work, helped to spark an international movement to help battered women, a once taboo subject. In 1979, Erin came to the United States at the invitation of the U.S. government and embarked on a Salvation Army tour of 21 cities to help set up shelters for victims of domestic violence there too. Erin moved to the United States in 1982 to open a shelter and lecture on the subject of family violence. During that time, she also wrote and published novels, as well as works of nonfiction, though she was consistently thwarted in her efforts to find direct ways to help men, or even raise attention to the issue of men in domestic relationships. One of Erin's books, Prone to Violence, was subjected to a campaign by radical feminists to steal it from bookstore shelves and destroy it, so bookstores would be afraid to carry it and would lose money if they tried. A feminist publisher at HarperCollins eventually told Erin that she hated her books and would see to it that they would all be taken out of print and that she would never be published again. This threat was successful, at least until her book, This Way to the Revolution, was finally published a couple of years ago by Peter-owned publishers after 10 years of being rejected by most major publishers. This Way to the Revolution is a history of the early women's movement and their hijacking of the domestic violence movement. To this day, Erin is still regularly attacked and even slandered for making an assertion, even though it should not be refutable. After all, it's the documented truth. In intimate relationships, men and women are equally violent. We would like to take a moment to urge that if you wish to call in to share a personal experience to the show, you probably want to keep things on a first-name basis, probably even use a pseudonym for yourself or any family members, so there's no concern about someone coming after you or, for that matter, suing us. But we want to hear your personal stories and reflections. Welcome to Domestic Violence Revelations with Erin Pizzey. The truth about domestic abuse is often painful to hear, but in truth there is hope, and we hope you'll stick around to hear it. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to episode number 2 of Domestic Violence Revelations with Erin Pizzey. You there, Erin?
Yes, I am, and the sun's shining.
Oh, isn't that a wonderful thing? We've got a lot to do today, and we've got an exciting show. I want to start with a couple of brief announcements. We're not going to have time to discuss it on the show, but a well-known father's rights activist in the UK named of George Rolfe, R-O-L-P-H, is currently staging a hunger strike, and we are probably going to have an article about that on the front page of A Voice for Men soon. I'm trying to get a hold of George to talk to him about what he's doing. I don't know if I endorse what he's doing, but we want to let people know it's happening, and so there'll be more about that. Also, there have been some recent political messiness regarding the group MRA London, which, Erin, you've recently become the patron of, yes?
Yes, I'm a patron of MRA London, and all the messiness is now behind us, and we're moving forward. And hopefully people who listen to this program can go to MRA London's website and write for us and share views with us. It's a very, very important part of my life.
Excellent. Just in case anybody wants to know, that website is MRA, that's Men's Rights Activists, mralondon.org. And actually, Erin has an article up there this week, actually on why I loathe feminism.
And how I think it will destroy the family, and it has.
All right, and I know that we're going to have future discussions about that particular issue on this show. But you all might want to look for that article, Why I Loathe Feminism and Believe It Will Destroy the Family, by Erin on mralondon.org. There's also a very good article up there this week on a female, called A Female Monster and a Hidden Sufferer, and it's a video of that people apparently think is funny, of a very violent woman, and it's really not very funny at all. It says a lot about us that we think that sort of thing is funny. And finally, what the heck is that all about? Sorry about that. Finally, we're going to bring in briefly Christina Hansen of the Earl Silverman Society to hopefully give us an update on what's going on. The Earl Silverman Society is an effort to open a new domestic abuse refuge or shelter for men in Canada. The only one that did exist in all of Canada recently shut down, and sadly its founder, Earl Silverman, killed himself. And Christina is hoping to carry on his work in his name. Do we have Christina on the line?
Hello.
Hello.
How are
Christina
you?
Hansen, welcome. Fine.
Thank you.
What can
Yay.
I'm happy to be on again.
Christina, what can you tell us about what your work on the Earl Silverman Society, how that's going for you?
Well, the paperwork is still in process. The Quebec government is not the swiftest when it comes to, government work. So we're still waiting on that to see if we can get nonprofit status. But the exciting thing that's happened this week is I sent an email off to another organization that's been in Montreal since 1989. It's called Oxygen House, or in French, it's called Maison M. And they've been working since, like I said, 1989. And what they are, it's a residential and community support resource for fathers who are living in personal or family or marital turmoil, and they have sole custody or shared access rights to their children, but don't have a permanent place of residence. So what Oxygen House does is they offer them a home, a community home to stay in, and therefore have a permanent place of residence where they can take care of their children and have visitation or take care of them if they have sole custody. And so I have a meeting and an interview coming up with one of the main directors for the house here in Montreal. They have, I think there's 5 houses across Quebec, and there's one in Montreal. And I'm going to be speaking with them and seeing what they can do to point us in the right direction. They want to work with us. So that's a huge step in the right direction.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, they don't currently have a battered men's refuge of any sort, but what
No.
they do have is resources for men and ways that men can do things like a homeless man or a man in a bad situation can still see his children. That's awesome all by itself.
Exactly, and they are familiar with domestically abused fathers. They don't specifically cater to domestically abused fathers, because this is more for the children than it is, for that. But they're really interested in the Earl Silverman Center and our ideas and, what we want to do. So they are offering support and their help, and this is great.
Well, I'm very excited to hear it. I know the difficulties of getting paperwork to establish a nonprofit corporation and all that are hard, but I'm glad that you're hitting the ground running and moving forward with that. Running a shelter for men who are fleeing abusive relationships is almost uncharted territory because almost no governments or charities do much of it.
Right.
Erin, you had some experiences with doing that.
Yes.
In a little bit, we're going to bring on a psychotherapist by the name of Tom Golden, who deals with counseling men. Erin, can you talk a little bit about what it was like, not trying to set up a shelter for men, but when you did manage to get it going? How is that different, or what different challenges?
Well, I think it really points to how the differences between men and women and what each sex expects. Because when I opened the little shelter in Chiswick and the mothers started to come in, there was very little that I needed to do to actually run the shelter, because the mothers took over cooking, washing, cleaning, taking care of each other and each other's children. An enormous amount of cooperation, which is actually how women have always cooperated, and they're used to cooperating like that. Because at the end of the day, women all share the same childbearing issues and all the various things that happen. When I opened the men's house and the first men moved in, I got a shock, because I assumed that the men would do exactly the same, and they didn't. Partly because they didn't really know how to communicate with each other. The house was derelict, just like ours was, and mothers picked up paintbrushes and got on with it. The men just broke up, it didn't even form a group, moved into their own rooms if they didn't share, and waited for something to come, someone to come and look after them. And the other problem, of course, is one that's faced internationally, and it's so sad that in this day and age, the richest countries in the world ignore men and their children. The men and who had a lot of money, several millionaires who are more than willing to put their hands in their pockets for women and children, wouldn't give me a penny for other men. And I find this in men's groups today, because I've worked with men's groups all over the world, and I notice when women want to have a meeting, they open their own homes. When men want to have a meeting, they have to find a room or a pub, or they don't actually socialize anything like the way women do. And I think that's partly to do with just being male and very, very vulnerable over private issues. And the chivalry gene in men, they don't sit down and dish the dirt on their exes or their partners, and certainly not on their mothers, whereas women will talk about anything. They don't have that, in a way, very disabling need to be closed and solitary.
Well, I'm going to, first off, I'm sure that Christina long-term will have some questions for you as she actually gets her first house opened.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping you're going to be a resource for her.
I'm delighted, absolutely delighted, Christina.
Thank you, Erin.
One of the things, 2 weeks ago we had our first show, and one of the things that happened to us was we had a gentleman named Jose call in who was, I won't even say somewhat suicidal, he was suicidal. To give everybody a brief update on Jose, I don't want to make this all about, I don't want to put him on the spot, but I had some very productive discussions with him, and I believe he is on a much better path. I haven't heard from him in a week or so, but he did a complete turnaround, and one of the ways he did a turnaround, I think, is because of some advice I gave him. And that advice came, well, he probably doesn't know it, came in part thanks to Tom Golden. Because having in the past spoken to men who are despondent, frustrated, in despair, I never knew what exactly to do. First off, I'm by no means a professional psychotherapist or anything. But second, it's like, what do I say to him exactly? And of course, I think this is male psychology. You do start thinking of solutions immediately. I think this is the way most men's brains work. Start thinking about solutions. And if you can't think of one, you tend to go into paralysis mode, which I think may be part of what you saw, Erin.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, because men are doers.
Yeah. And what you were just saying there about how the men won't get together and express their feelings or whatever, or talk to each other, culturally, I almost think we tell men they're wrong to do that or to be that way, but in a way they might be right to do that way. Well, I have a reading by Tom Golden, I believe from one of his books. It's certainly from one of his videos on YouTube on his Men Are Good channel, and we're going to listen to that now because I think it's a very insightful look on how men process anguish and pain and grief and those sorts of things, and how we need to respect the man's way of doing this better than we do in our culture. And if we understand and respect it better, we might be able to help them better. So, James, if you could cue that up and then bring Tom on the line, I would sure appreciate it.
You're not dealing with your feelings. Are you tired of being told you're not dealing with your feelings? If so, keep watching. When people think of healing in our culture, they will usually think of crying openly, talking about your difficulties, and talking about the past. Many women find this approach very helpful and fulfilling. Many men do not. But are men deficient because they're not like most women? Absolutely not. When I first started doing therapy with men fresh out of grad school, it looked like men were deficient. I worked in a clinic with all female therapists except for me and was given most of the male clients since the females didn't want to work with the men. This left me with a huge caseload of men and floundering since what I'd been taught in grad school was not working so well with the men. I needed to find out what helped men and find out quickly. As I struggled with this, I slowly started to realize that there wasn't something wrong with the men. There was something wrong with the therapy. What I'd been taught in grad school had been built to help women, help them talk, help them emote, and help them talk about the past. Worked well with women, but it wasn't so hot in working with men. Therapy basically ignored a man's way. What I eventually found was that men tend to heal through their action and do so through honoring and changing the future. Notice this is markedly different from the standard interaction, open emoting, and talking about the past of traditional therapy. But how did I come to these conclusions? One of the first things that tipped me off that men had a very different way to heal was when I ran into the cross-cultural research on grief. It showed repeatedly that indigenous people tend to give men actions following a loss, but give women a safe place to talk and emote. The picture you see is of the Yurona men of Australia doing the shark dance at a funeral in honor of the deceased. Their actions honor the person who died, who is just out of sight. This is just one example among many. The literature showed that men were almost always the ones to do things like dig the grave, care for the body, do the ritual, etc. So I started watching men's actions after a loss or trauma and started seeing things I'd completely missed before. Men use action rather than interaction to tell their story, and most people, including the men, simply don't see it. Next, I ran into the research of Shelley Taylor, Ph.D., who studied women and stress. Taylor found that women, when stressed, don't fight or flight. They instead tend and befriend. In other words, women will move towards interaction when stressed, while men move towards action. This confirmed what I'd been seeing clinically. The more I looked, the more I saw that men were indeed dealing with their feelings, but instead of talking and emoting openly, they were taking actions that honored the loss. The men were doing this automatically and without prompting. It seems that it's simply a natural response which I had previously missed. A quick example might be Eric Clapton. Clapton's son died in a tragic accident which left Clapton in what he described as a waking nightmare. How did he respond? He secluded himself and played guitar for long periods. Eventually, 3 songs came forth: Tears in Heaven, My Father's Eyes, and The Circus Left Town. Each of these songs is about his waking nightmare. Can you see how Clapton's actions of playing the guitar and writing the songs were helping him process his emotions? Did he go into therapy? No. He used his own action to honor his loss and his son, and through those actions he told his story. Not through interaction, but through action and honoring. When asked about how hard it might have been to write the songs, Clapton responded, "Playing the guitar was actually the solution." I wrote a book titled Swallowed by a Snake, The Gift of the Masculine Side of Healing, that explains this process in more detail. The book is in its 2nd edition since the year 2000. Recently, I wrote a very concise e-book that updates the Snake book and also offers tips for helping men heal. I've also created a website, thewaymenheal.com, that includes a video book of about 2 hours of video that tells the same story but in video format.
Okay, now that was taken from Tom Golden's YouTube channel, Men Are Good, and I just stole the audio from that, shamelessly, brazenly stole it to share it with you, but you can find a wonderful video of that and on the Men Are Good channel. And, of course, there's links in the show notes to Tom's websites. Did you find that interesting, Erin?
Yes, I did. I was fascinated by what he had to say. And in many ways, I absolutely agree with him. I do think that somebody like Eric Clapton knows how to heal himself. And in a way, you see, women gather in groups to comfort each other. And men tend to go away into the woods and sit silently. And I think there are differences, and they have to be respected.
Well, what I'd like to do is bring Tom Golden on the line so you and he perhaps could have a chat. Do we have Tom available?
Tom is here.
Hi, Tom. Meet Erin. Erin, meet Tom.
Hello,
Erin,
Tom.
Erin, it's very good to meet you. I had so much admired your work.
Oh, thank you. And I was fascinated by what you were saying just now.
Oh, good.
And I know it's the whole business of men and healing. I was saying to Dean the other day, maybe you can comfort me because sometimes I really feel I need it. It's this feeling that you get from men is they don't actually come for help until they've lost absolutely everything.
Yeah, why is that?
I don't know. I think it's a fear of being seen as weak, not being able to take care of yourself as a man.
Yeah.
The feeling of, so many men that I work with have essentially spent years and years never telling anybody anything, and it's been absolute silence.
Yes.
And particularly in England, of course, we have the stiff British upper lip.
Yeah.
And I did, but it doesn't mean that the wounds aren't deep.
Exactly.
And for many of those men, you can just look at them and say to them, you're suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And, somehow one has to be able to move on from there. But it's so hard because with nowhere resident for a man who has been so severely traumatized by what's happened to him. I'm thinking of a man this morning who woke up to find his bed ablaze. She'd set light to the bed. I know, and he just got out in time. And they jailed her, but it didn't take her long to get out because, of course, she claimed that he was violent, but she wasn't. And he lost his children, he lost everything. And we first and foremost, before we can be really effective, we have to have somewhere safe for men to go.
Yes.
And then some people like you who know how to treat the desperation of men, because it's different to the desperation for women.
It is different. I think it is different. I think there's some very good reasons why men don't talk about stuff. And actually, the little ebook that I wrote, it goes into detail in the 4 reasons that I think men are like that. And I think that's important for us to know. And, of course, the first one is that men's pain is taboo in our culture. No one wants to touch it. And men aren't stupid enough to go out in public and start emoting, because if they do, they know they're going to get shamed. And so they deal with it themselves. And the man's solution almost always is, I can handle this. I can do it myself. And he moves towards independence. And, of course, that moves him farther away from potential help. But he's doing that because of his own being, his own way of doing things. We know from evolutionary psychology that men basically are in this hierarchy. They're in a hierarchy every day of the week. Every day they're in this hierarchy that kind of they want to appear to be on top of things, and they want to not appear as though they're on the bottom. And trust me, when you're grieving openly, you're at the bottom. People are going to look down on you. Women will look down on you. The research of the guy in Australia, a psychiatrist in Australia, found that when men state that they're depressed, when they show depression in relationships, the women will hit them. And the reason they're hitting, he says, provider. Well, what he's saying is that evolutionarily, that the women will strike the men because they're trying to see if he's able to take care of them. That in the old days, they need to know that the man's going to protect them from the woolly mammoth, and if he can't protect them, he's got to find somebody else. And so they hit him to try and say, can he fight back or not? And if he fights back, they stay. If he doesn't fight back, they leave. But this is the dilemma that many men face today, and it's a mess.
Well, it's a sort of manufactured mess. Because had we not had, in the 1974, the sudden emergency put upon men, which has made it so much harder, which is the feminist movement, who came out quite openly and said, men are the problem, the world without men is a better place, the families are not a safe place for women and children. All this rubbish and garbage was thrown at men internationally across the Western world.
Yes.
And in a sense, as we've always said, for such a long time, men genuinely just thought it was a joke.
Yes.
They really didn't take it seriously. Now, I think 40 years later, men are, thank God, beginning to wake up. And I belong to MRA London and the Voice for Men as well, and other men's groups. And hopefully men are beginning to get a sense of self again.
Well, I think many men have a sense of self. It's just not something that looks like what feminists want it to look like. You know? I think
feminists have always said that they were going to revolutionize men.
Yeah.
And basically what you've got is the new man.
Yes. I think, the question is, why did feminism catch on like it did? Why did it catch fire? And men's voices were drowned out. I mean, why did that happen like that? And I think, again...
Because because it was radical chic. Because there was enormous barricades that women leapt on top of. It's the first real women's movement.
But men leapt on it too. And the reason they did is because men have always been there to take care of women. And so they wanted to protect women. They wanted to take care of these women. And the chivalry just comes out in spades.
Yeah, but what the women said at the time, in the 70s, in these big collectives, we do not want men to take care of us. We are going to be economically independent.
Right.
We do not want them to open doors. We do not want them to carry anything for us. In fact, essentially, we do not want what is traditionally a male man.
Right.
We want all the responsibilities that he's got to carry. Yeah, but we want to remake it. That was my time when I had a small boy. Boys weren't allowed to have any toys that had any masculine identity at all.
Yes.
You go to women's houses and there'd be dolls and tea sets and all the rest of it, and my son would take you to Action Man. I was not popular. But it did extend everywhere. So we had finally a whole generation of very feminized men.
Yes, and it plays out today with grief and with domestic violence because the man's pain is expected to be like a woman's. We send all these counselors into schools when there's a trauma, and they sit and talk and talk and talk and talk. And that's not going to help the guys in the same sort of way.
No, it doesn't, actually.
I have my own somewhat provocative thesis on why the more radical feminism didn't get resistance or more resistance or pushback from men. Yes, part of it may be chivalry. Part of it is also, I'm firmly of the opinion that instinctively, like this is almost built into us, men do whatever women ask them to do.
Yes.
That's true.
It's a radical thought, and feminists don't like observing this truth, but for the most part, men do whatever women ask.
Yeah. And why?
Because they want to please women.
Yeah.
They know the consequences from historic times, like Sister. If the men didn't do what they wanted, the women all went on sex strike. The home and the hearth is where women dominate.
Yes.
There's that. And I think there's just something in our genes, like I think we're built to protect and nurture and meet women's needs. And men complain, or women complain, and men think, I need to do something about this.
Yes. Exactly.
Whatever it is. And
a woman's pain is a call to action. A man's pain is taboo. Period.
And so the question I would put to you, Tom, actually it's going to be a twofold question. Part one is, how do we get men to, without this shaming them and telling them they have to talk about their feelings, how do we get them to seek help, and what are the appropriate types of help, do you think?
I don't know that we need to get them to seek help. I'm not sure that's the best approach. I think the first thing we need to do is to start honoring men for the way they do things and to bless them for the way they're doing things, because I'm telling you, the men that come in and see me, I just watch them. I watch what they do. They're already healing themselves. They're doing it now. I have to point it out to him sometimes and say, oh, look, that's the way you're healing. And he looks at me and says, what? And I say, yeah. And once we talk about it for a couple of minutes, he goes, damn right. So the first shift has to be that we need to honor the men for the way they are instead of shaming them for not being like women. I'm so sick and tired of that crap. We need to honor men for being different.
The men we have to get to, one of the problems is the men we have to get to are the men who are now, rather like the last program, Josie, who are so far down that they're going to very quickly be part of the suicide figures. I'm appalled of the suicide rates for men, and most of it is because
Yes.
they've lost their home and their children, and nobody actually, there's no studies on it, no government is in the slightest bit bothered about a genocide, virtually, of men. And it's frightening me because I see it all the time. I had a program. It was called We People. It was men in the 70s who were out of work and in various stages of decay. I married them to the older boys in my project, and they brought their trades with them. They were plumbers, painters, decorators, brickies. They worked alongside my teenage boys who lost their violent fathers. And because the men could do and build buildings for me and repair stuff alongside the boys, they both helped each other. Now that is a therapeutic program for men that works. Yes.
And you hit on something very important, Erin. That is that when men have a job loss, that's a huge loss of sense of self. It's tremendous. And to give them something then where they can be shoulder to shoulder with other men, and that's one of the keys, Dean, is, the women tend to heal in a face-to-face mode. You sit and you have eye contact and you talk about it. The men tend to heal shoulder to shoulder, doing things together, not necessarily talking, but being on the same team and working towards the same goal. That's more a place where men feel safe to then get their story out.
And that, see, to me, when we're talking specifically about the subject of domestic violence, I think what we're probably going to find is the typical pattern is this man has been dealing with an enormous amount of pain in a difficult relationship for a really long time.
Yes.
And now is at his wit's end. By the time he calls out for help, he's going to be on his back and feeling as helpless as imaginable and ashamed of himself for being in that position.
Yes, exactly.
And I would think that if anybody were running a program like the Earl Silverman Society is planning, should be in some way prepared to say, I've got something for you to do. Or I have a place where you can go and be alone for a little bit, and then when you're ready, I've got something for you to do. I don't know what do is, but I would think that would be part of an effective therapeutic program.
But if they could ever do something very magical, I was very lucky because I had some very big donors. If somebody in Canada, and you have to remember, I am half Canadian, would donate some land and building equipment and say to men, all men in the community, come build the first men's shelter in Canada, and that's something that all men could participate in, and women. And that would be the most creative thing anybody could ever think of, an immediate solution. And I'm sure there's somebody out there who is willing to donate that kind of money.
And time.
No, they don't have to donate the time. The program can find the people and the time to build it. They'll find builders can. I had so much built for me. I owned rows of houses that were derelict, and they were all built back by men and some of our women who joined them.
One of the things that comes to my mind is the shed movement in Australia. Have you heard of that before?
Yes, I have, but I don't know much about it.
Well, it kind of goes along with the man's natural way of healing, which is doing something with others, shoulder to shoulder. And the shed is just a place where they have a bunch of tools, and they might have a TV, and men just gather there, and they work on projects together. And the guys will tell you, you read on it, and they talk about, we did this project together, but actually we talked the whole time about my wife who died a year ago. So it's through this doing that they start connecting with the lost, because it's a safe place.
Well,
I have a sad bit of information about the men's shed movement in Australia.
Really?
On A Voice for Men, of course, we're obviously a very activist community, and we have a large contingent of Australians. And Aussie, oi, 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 love you guys. But a few of them have come forth and said, basically, women moved in and started rearranging the furniture and wanting to do things their way, and the whole thing turned into a mess, and feminists got involved, and basically, it's an enormous. It's been a big flop for a lot of people because of that, and I think that. that's a learning lesson, probably for the Earl Silverman people and others. You're going to absolutely want women involved, and yet women do, I don't care how politically incorrect it is, women do have this habit of barging in on male space because they want in, and they want to be a part, and they want to be included, and then they demand that things start being changed to suit their comfortable sensibilities, which ruins it.
You know the way we dealt with that in the refuge? Because at any point, half the staff and volunteers were men. The women of the house were the ones who made the decisions, i.e. the mothers who were paying the rent. And they decided that the men were more than welcome to come and to be part of the community, but men had no votes. It was women, because it was a women's centre that made the decisions. And I think the Shed would have used that as a much better model, that any women coming in were more than welcome, but they did not make the decisions. It was the men's place. What's wrong with that?
That might be one way, but my way would be no women in there, period. It's a men's space.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. I mean, that's fair enough. I mean, it's
as soon as women come in, the men start competing.
That's quite right. And then they do know
you lose the safety.
Right.
You lose the safety.
Because they start competing over the woman.
Yes.
But they have to know that they are not hated by women. Women have to be able to take part in some constructive manner, I would think. I mean, how Christina Hansen's about to start a center. She's a woman. What's she going to do? Stay outside and not go in? Let's bring Christina on the line, can we?
She's there. Hi, Christina.
Can you? Hi. This is really interesting because, like Dean said, I'm a woman, and I'm going to be trying to get the Earl Silverman Center off the ground as a woman, and it's supposed to be a shelter for men. And what I do, because right now I'm also the organizer for the Men's Rights Montreal group, and it's a bunch of men. They come and they meet every second Saturday in Montreal. What I try to do is I try to be the background. I try to remain in the background. I don't generally say anything. I'm there at the meeting, but I let them run the conversation. I let them lead. I don't stick my nose in it. I organize the group, but that's basically where I want to stay. I want to stay part of the background. This is for the men. And I think that that's better for them because I've seen how they open up more to one another when I fade into the back. And as someone who's going to be opening a shelter for men, that's how I want to be as well within the shelter. I will open the center, I will run it, paperwork, all that stuff. But I want the men to not feel like it's a woman running the show. I don't want that. I want them to have their own space. What we've thought of doing is having a workshop with tools, things that they can, get their hands dirty, physical work, different sort of programs like that they can work with. And I don't want to be in their face. I want to be part of the background so that they can do this themselves without a woman stepping in and saying, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. I don't think that that's going to be helpful in any way.
Silence. Come on, gentlemen.
When I was saying men only, I wasn't talking about the shelter. I was talking about the men's sheds stuff.
Okay, yeah.
If you've got a shelter for men, I think you're going to need nurses and doctors and whoever's there, and it's not something where you have to just have penises present,
Oh, no. What I'm saying is, for me personally, I don't want them to come in right away see that there's there's a woman here, and she's going to,
Yes, I was agreeing with what you were saying. I think it's good that you're able to be sensitive to that and pull back. And a shelter environment is going to be a little bit different from a shed environment.
Oh, yeah.
what I was trying to say before. My comments were about the shed.
But also, I think it's worth thinking about the fact that I've often said this to men, because they are dominated, however good their mothers are, by those very early years of their lives. There's a very big part of men that are quite frightened of women, and sometimes with very good reason.
And I feel that.
Sorry?
I was just going to say that. I was going to agree with you.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
no, and I
for
think
very good reasons sometimes.
Yeah, it is. And I've often said, you see, that when the father is violent, it's a tragedy. But when the mother's violent, it's a catastrophe. Because that is the primary bond for most babies. And when the mother is not only violent towards the child, but also neglectful, we've talked about this before, that the child is brain damaged because the brain doesn't form normally. So unless you can get therapy and treatment in, which is what you should have in all shelters, but of course it doesn't really exist in those shelters. They're just hostels. People who beat each other up and are cruel, put cigarettes out on each other and the things that they do to each other. When they do separate, it's like they've suffered a catastrophe and they need an enormous amount of help, not just physical help and a room, but they also need, as we've been talking about, healing and a place that's safe to heal. It's no good talking about healing to a man who's homeless.
The thing I was very happy to hear you say, Christina, is that exact attitude you have. I remember, especially the feminists of the 70s, but even to this day, will complain that they aren't being paid attention to, and men, especially in an environment like we're talking about, I believe need the empowerment to say, and women need to hear, this is not about you, Buttercup, to be blunt about it. If you want us, we're happy to have you in a support role, but this isn't about you. And I think the women who do get involved need to hear that. This is a men's space. Do you understand this? Before we let you in the door, this isn't about you. Do you get that? That would be part of my own screening process. That would be part of my screening process. I noticed, I couldn't help but notice, Tom and I both instinctively chuckled, almost nervously, when we said men are afraid of women.
Yeah.
And now you just laughed. And yet it is true, and it really isn't funny. It is true.
Yeah.
No,
yes,
it is true. It is.
Why is it true?
And I can go into. I have an observation about this that I'll share. That maybe we'll get into the why thing. It is patently obvious to anybody with a brain that the average man is physically capable of killing a woman with his bare hands. And the average man is capable of doing that physically to any woman, and yet the vast majority of men do not. Now, why? Now, this stumbled upon me. This hit me recently. We have a horse. His name is Reggie. Gelding, weighs about 1,000 pounds. And very sweet, gentle horse. And I like him, so don't get me wrong. It occurred to me while working with him recently that if I wanted to, I could torture this animal and I could kill this animal. And he would probably let me. How is that possible, given that he outweighs me by a good 700-800 pounds, has hooves and teeth, and could probably kill me within 5 seconds? Why would it not go that way? Because it is not in his nature to behave that way. And I don't think it is in men's nature to be that way toward women. That's my little sermon on that.
Well, I think you've got to say, for a start, that the figures for men and women killing each other, we do know. In England, it's 2 women every week. Well, they never mention, of course, 1 man dies every week. So, yes, I mean, there are percentage of the population who are murderous, and all of them virtually come from these incredibly violent, toxic backgrounds. Now, vast majority of people won't ever think of even listening to what we're talking about because it's miles away from their real lives. Most men wouldn't dream of lifting a hand to a woman. Women tend to be more explosive behind the front door, and I think when all the figures are ratified and done, you'll find that women tend to attack first, largely knowing that the man won't hit back. And I think you have to think about that. The other part of it is that for many men, they channel quite naturally their whole emotional lives through women. Their relationships with each other, pair bonding, drinking with each other, going to football matches or whatever. But actually, they're real. They put their heart in their partner's hands. And it's so interesting because when you're dealing with men, very often they never really leave that first violent woman. It doesn't matter how happy they are in their second marriages. It's almost as though a man gives his heart, he gives it almost permanently. That's very different for women. Women can move on, and women do move on. Mind you, they keep the house and the children, so it makes it a lot easier. But even then, women do. There's something I've always said, and I know there's nothing behind me to prove this, but I used to notice in the refuge how badly the boys were affected by the violence and how resilient the girls were. And at that point, the feminists were busy bragging about the numbers of men in prison versus the number of women in prisons. And I would say yes, but have you thought that it is men who are so much more emotionally vulnerable than women? And you have to remember that under one, it's mostly boy children that are murdered and murdered by their mothers. And most child abuse is actually done by mothers. The safest place for a child is with its natural biological father.
That's actually true. There is substantial research to show that, and it makes people very angry, but I can show anybody the research if they want to. The majority of violent child abuse, not all, but a majority of violent child abuse and murder of small children is committed by women, not men. Now, why that's true, part of it is single motherhood. They have more opportunity maybe, but we've got this societal denial about violent women. And men are terrified and don't know how to deal with it because I think instinctively they don't want to because they want to put women on these pedestals. In any case, we have or had a Michael Michalczyk on hold. I hope he's still there because he had a question. Michael, is he available? Do we have Michael?
No, unfortunately, Michael is no longer available.
Okay, well, that's fine. Michael, if you're still out there and want to call back in, we do want to take your call. I think, but we have Danny Boy on the line from Canada, and he has a question. Dan, would you like to come online?
Well, yeah. Hi, Erin. Hi, Tom. Hi, everybody else.
Hello.
Hey there.
Hello.
So much of a hi, Chris. I didn't realize you were still in the mix there.
I am still here.
Go, girl. Not really so much of a question, but just like my experience. I thought I'd kind of share that. When I first found out what had happened to me, and I went to the police, I was told, "Suck it up. We don't intend to enforce the law." That was said February 3rd, 2009, at 7:15 p.m. at Hamilton.
What actually happened to you?
An ex got a hold of some legal documents of mine that involved my future. This is where it starts. And she opened them and kept them past their respond-by date, thereby costing my future. I was going to be retrained after a back injury, and she did it not once but twice. So I was told, "Suck it up. We don't intend to enforce the law." And then also I was hit a few times as well, assaulted, and that was the response to that was to take the woman to an abused women's shelter. Oh yes, yeah.
You were to take her.
Pardon?
But you were to take her to the abused women's shelter.
I'm sorry, Erin. I still didn't catch that.
Can't you hear? Oh, sorry. No, what I was saying is, so the police told you to take her to an abused women's shelter.
Oh no, they came.
Is that right?
And they
came and took her
and limousined her over there.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yep.
Even though she was hitting you. Even though she was hitting you. Right.
Yes. Yes.
Common.
Yes. And then,
Common.
okay, so this affected me so profoundly that I had hives coming out of my hands. Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I went to the local hospital and I explained the situation. Pat on the head, couple pills. Go home and it'll be all right tomorrow. Well, it didn't. It wasn't all right the next day. I literally was in such a daze that I walked my dog out into traffic, not just not there, not intentionally, like I wasn't trying to off myself, but just not there. I was in such a daze. The next thing that happened, I finally got in to see a therapist, and I wasn't seeing a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I was passed off onto a psychological nurse or psychological nurse, and she said, "Suck it up." A female, and
fuck you.
Oh yeah,
Fuck you.
Debbie Fournier.
I'm
How you
sorry,
doing, honey? I remember what you said to me very, very well. And I'm quite angry about it. Incredible amounts of anger, and just nowhere to turn. Nobody providing a damn thing.
Yes.
And I just watched my future get robbed from me, and endorsed and encouraged by police, and I made phone calls all over the place. Catholic Family Services, sorry, we have no services for you. There, and I reached out to every single person I could think of, every single entity I could think of, and it was always the same thing. Suck it up, man up, horseshit. And then we wonder why guys snap and take their lives. And so,
no, I don't, because exactly what you said explains exactly how it feels. And there's a part of a man that unfairness is one of the biggest things that drives them towards suicide, because the pain is so unbearable. It's easier to die than to live.
And we've mentioned this before, and I've had people be dismissive of this. Really, I'm sort of used to it, and I'm sort of not. Every time I mention to a lot of what we call the blue pill people, the people who aren't cognizant of men's issues, when we mention that in the places like the United States, Canada, the UK, men are 3 to 4 times as likely to kill themselves, they say these batshit stupid things. They say one of 2 batshit stupid things. Batshit stupid thing number 1 is, but women are more likely to threaten to kill themselves, so it's just as big of a problem.
No, it's not. Women do it. Women do it. Actually, women often do it. It's a call for help sometimes, but it's often attention-seeking, because I've had that. I know it.
I've seen it in action. So that's batshit stupid number 1. Batshit stupid number 2 is, men are doers and they're better at it. And fuck you! These men are dead! Excuse me, I'm getting angry.
I understand.
I'm tired of hearing both of those things. Go ahead, Tom. Tom, go ahead.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I'd be happy to go ahead if you want me to.
Well,
all right.
That was me.
I think Danny was going to say something.
Yeah, I understand your anger there, Dean. So anyways, that's what's led me to basically, I resolved I'm not going to let this happen to another man. I just can't. I can't leave this for the next person to clean up.
Exactly.
So I've done quite a few things.
Well done.
I look into I wrote that article about the suicide rates for men and boys. For a voice for men. Look up the statistics, and then to sit there and have Big Red, sing to me, cry me a river, when every fiber of my being just wanted to scream at her back. I still held it in check.
Yeah.
And then another person who I talked to about it. Now, I guess this would be a form of domestic abuse. would be Brenda Marie Higgins. Her husband rolled himself underneath the train in London, Ontario in 2010, and Barbara Kay wrote an article about that. But I speak to Brenda Marie quite often. We got phone numbers. She's only about an hour away from me. But that situation, I'm going to call that domestic abuse as well. And some of you may or may not be.
Wait a minute. Let me just clarify something. You are not accusing his current wife, widow, of domestic abuse.
Not Brenda. No. She's the ex-wife.
Okay. Right. Go ahead then.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, he rolled himself underneath the train for a little less than $4,000 because his ex-wife was taking him to Family Responsibilities Office after he got laid off from his job. So really, I'm going to call that one domestic abuse as well, and it was domestic abuse that literally led to his death.
Not only did she take him to court for more child support or whatever, more support as it was, at a time when she knew he was out of work, but because of an arrearage, they had taken away his license to do his trade, so he was unable to find work and was facing prison time for the crime of being behind on payments that he couldn't make because they had taken away his ability to make money.
Yes, absolutely. Now, for those of you who don't know, Paul was a trucker, so that was his livelihood.
That was his livelihood. Yeah.
But it also goes on to taxi drivers or lorry drivers, I guess you would call, or bus drivers,
yes.
and delivery people as well. Once I started digging and looking at it, and I was just absolutely disgusted at the way the Canadian government, and in fact most governments across, most first world governments across the world observe,
absolutely,
or deal with men who are getting screwed over, abused.
Well, the thing is, I was in Canada doing a tour, so I went right across to Saint-Jean Cools. And I've always said this, and I said this in the last program, of all the countries I have been to, Canada is the most frightening, and it's the most rigid in terms of hatred towards men and boys. And I saw many groups of men, no passports, no driving license. It was almost like genocide. I keep saying that because slowly, we are doing such damage to men and boys. It's going to take years, if ever, to get everything back on its feet, including family life.
I'd agree with you there, Erin. Yeah, it's a pretty scary place, Canada. We don't. It can be, and I hear stories all the time. Another friend of mine, and I'm not going to name a name, but his wife was pregnant with the second child, and there was a verbal argument going on. She locked herself in the bathroom and punched her pregnant belly and said, "I'm going to call the cops and tell them you did this."
Oh, God.
Now, my friend...
Yes, they do.
Oh, yeah. Now, my friend went to the police, okay? And he sat there and he explained the whole situation, okay? The officer left for 5 minutes and then came back and arrested him.
Yeah.
Okay? Apparently, his ex-wife called and said that he did it. Now, $7,000.
Yeah, and her word is law.
Well,
and he has no human rights.
No.
There's no human rights.
This is why a lot of us are angry, and there is a growing men's movement, because I've even seen this. People will say, well, woman hits you, call the cops. You're in a domestic violence relationship, call one of the domestic violence hotline. I even had one feminist in particular, hi Danielle, if you're out there listening, say, you're scaring men away from calling and asking for resources. And I said, you're damn right. They could go to jail for being beaten up.
Yeah.
They do, and they go for jail. And, it's interesting in Canada. I must just add this because I'm still shocked to the core. There's two things that happen. Once she gets into the shelter, then it is advocated that she wants a fast divorce, points out that she's a battered wife or partner. And then, if that doesn't work fast enough, the next is called the silver bullet in Canada, which means she claims he's abused the children. That'll do it.
Now, I'd just like to finish off that story. $7,000 later, the judge told my buddy's ex-wife, basically you're a liar, and we don't, we know that you're lying, and my friend was, found not guilty, divorce ensued, and he is a wonderful father to his 2 children. And lots.
Well, so after that trauma, he managed to overcome. Thank God. A lot of men don't. A lot of men don't. Thank God he did. And we need to do something about it. Now, I just got a little angry, and we just started talking about anger. And so I'm going to use that as a convenient segue to another reading by Mr. Tom Golden on the subject of male anger and why we actually probably need to respect and understand male anger better. James, can we cue that up, please?
Okay, let's talk for a minute about the major reactions that most of us have with grief and what those are. There's a lot of them, but we're going to talk about 3 today. And the first let's talk about is anger. That good old red-hot thing that most people want to avoid and run away from. Yeah, now why anger? Well, anger basically is an emotion that fuels our stories. Our stories are energized by the anger, and it's the stories then that help process that anger and start breaking it up a little bit, help it to dissipate a bit. But it works both ways. The anger sort of brings the grief sort of dissipates the anger as we are able to tell the story. Let's take an example. There was a friend of mine who did an international workshop, and the last day of the workshop, he was informed that one of the members of his workshop, a guy from South America, his brother had died. So my friend had to tell the man that his brother had died, and the man gave my friend a very odd instruction. He said, what I'd like you to do is get 6 men and some pieces of cloth and meet me in the parking lot. My friend was a little bit struck by that, but he said, okay, that's what I'll do. So he got 6 guys, he got some cloth, he met them in the parking lot. The man proceeds to take the cloth and bite down on it with his teeth. Then he instructs my friend and the 6 men to hold him in various places so that he was restrained by 6 men. As soon as he felt the restraints were in place, he started to struggle. My friend was kind of freaked out. First he was thinking, hey, what are we going to do here? So what they did was they just held him back. And he said, just hold me no matter what. And they held him, and they held him, and they held him, and he struggled and struggled and struggled. Until finally, after what seemed like 6 years to my buddy, but it was probably, a couple of minutes, the guy crumpled up in tears. Isn't that a beautiful thing? He used his anger as a means to connect in with that pain and loss. And for some of our population, anger is a safe way in. It's a safe way in. The men, for instance, are oftentimes more allowed to be angry than they are to be sad. What do we call a sad man? We call him a wimp or a wuss or whatever. Who knows what you call him in Ireland? But we have some name for him. And I'll bet all over the world they have names for men who have a lot of sadness. So men will oftentimes use their anger as a means to get into that sadness. And they use the emotion that's given to them to move into the one that's shamed. And what's interesting is with women, you can see just the opposite. When I've worked with women over the years, and she'll be crying and crying and crying, and I'll look at her, and what I hope is the right time, I say, can you tell me what the tears are about? And she'll look at me and she'll say, I'm angry. And I go, whoa, okay. It shocks me just about every time it happens, but it happens a lot. What's she doing? She's doing the exact opposite of what this other man did. She's using her accepted emotion, which is the tears and the crying. People kind of accept women being like that to move into the unaccepted realm, the anger. So both men and women are using their strength to move into that which is shamed. I think that's kind of interesting, don't you think? But what is anger? What is it? What's it made of? If you look at what it's made of, you can do a whole lot more with it. Because really, when you break anger down, it breaks into 2 components. Expectation and hurt. Expectation and hurt. We expected something to happen that didn't, and we feel hurt in response. Think about the last time you were really pissed off, and I'll bet you that you'll be able to plug in and go, oh, yeah, I expected her to do that, and that, and when she didn't, it was like that was disrespectful to me, and I felt hurt in response to that. But one of the boons for relationships, really, is to break your anger down into expectation and hurt. So when you go to someone and say, you know, I expected X, Y, Z would happen, and I felt hurt that it didn't, people respond, really? Is that right? But if you took the exact same emotion and went to them and said, I'm angry, what are they going to do? They're going to run. So in a way, it's kind of making it safe for everyone. Break it down to its component parts, which is expectation and hurt. But a lot of times, you know, when we're working with people who are grieving, they're not going to be nice about it. They're going to be really angry. And you know what? That's okay. My mentor, Bill Wimp, used to say, tell a story about a woman he worked with who he would go out, he was a priest, and he'd go out to her house when she was grieving. And each time he went there, he'd notice that she was driving up and down the driveway, up and down the driveway. And Bill didn't say anything at first. He didn't say anything the second or third time. But the fourth time it happened, he said, I'm just curious about your driving up and down the driveway. What's going on with that? She said, oh. She said, well, every day when I come home, I go to the mantelpiece. I get some of his ashes, and I take them out to the driveway. I put the ashes in the driveway, and I run over the son of a bitch every day. Was she angry? Yes. Did she have expectation of hurt? Most likely. But Bill said, that's good grief. Yes, and in some ways it is good grief, but in some ways it's not. Because one of the things we need to do is to be able to tell the difference between two things, between what is anger and what is hostility. You know, and those two need to be separated. So many people are confused about this, and so many times what you see is people feeling completely entitled to be furious, and they become hostile instead. They're not really angry, they're hostile. You know, angry is, I'm angry that such and such. That's an I statement. I am angry. That's anger. You're a jackass is hostility. Can you tell the difference between the two? One is taking responsibility for our internal state. I'm angry about this. I'm angry about that. The other is pointing the finger and saying, you're the jackass. There's something wrong with you. Hostility is no good. That doesn't help anyone. We need to help people differentiate between the two, because anger is okay. Let that flow. The more you work with the anger, the more the anger is there, the more it's going to dissipate and fall by the wayside. Hostility, not so much. It's not going away. The more you encourage it, the more you're going to get. So being able to tell the difference between those two is a real blessing. And encourage people to be angry. You know, angry is okay, but not conflate the two. You know, so many times I've seen people say, I'm angry that you're a jackass. And then they say, wait a minute, you can't talk like that. I have a right to be angry. Yeah, but you don't have a right to call him a jackass. Okay, so we're getting a little bit off topic here, but that's really okay. So for some people, anger is a way to move into the safety and to move then into the tender emotions. And the more we can kind of work with that, the more we can let the anger chip away by taking a chunk out of the belly over and over and over again, the more that anger is going to come down a little teeny bit at a time, and that's exactly what we want.
Okay. I got to tell you, Tom, when I first heard that, I almost cried because I realized for much of my life, when I got angry, or I saw especially one of my male friends getting angry over some terrible shit he was going through, I thought, that's wrong. I've got to diffuse that anger and tell him not to be angry.
Mm-hmm.
I might think I was giving the wrong advice to myself and others. And I liked the way you talked about there is a sharp difference between anger and aggression or
hostility.
Yeah. What's your general advice for people to Let's say, we've got somebody who's starting a group or a shelter or even a discussion group for men who are angry. They get shamed for being angry, don't they?
Yes.
And we need to stop that, don't we?
Yeah, and what you need is a mature steward who's able to kind of see the difference and to help people with it. Unfortunately, we've also, the feminists basically have rooted that out too. It's the masculine part that would say, wait, no, here's what's happening here, stop that. And, that's a very masculine kind of yang way of dealing with things. And now the only thing that's allowed in our culture is yin. We need to hear what's you know what I'm saying?
I call it estrogen soup.
Estrogen soup, yes.
Yeah,
and we've got a big bowl. We've got a big bowl.
And it doesn't suit men at all. And actually, it doesn't suit women either, in many ways.
Yeah,
because for so many of my women, so many of men and women both, when the pain drives them, they are frightening to other people because they're enraged.
Yeah.
And the thing is, sometimes I used to with a woman, especially a very violent woman, because I'm big, I'd wrap my arms around her and say, if you lose it, the world is not going to explode. Go for it. And usually what would happen, she'd just burst into tears. And the men, I used to hug men on the doorstep. They'd say to me, I'm going to fucking kill you. And I'd give them a great big hug and then they could cry. If you have to love people better.
Erin, you got some courage. I love it.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what people need. They need a safe place. They need a safe place where someone is willing to hear their story. When Danny Boy was talking over and over and over again, people refused to hear his story. They refused to hear what was going on with him, which left him with the sense of, what the hell? I don't exist.
Yeah.
And so, that's a clue, too, for a men's shelter, is to have a place where people can tell their story and you can hear it.
Yeah,
and finally, the men will be able to tell it, and people will hear it, and they'll be shocked. Say, wow.
I was talking to a man the other day who suffered terribly, and I said at the end of it, because of his father, and I said, finally, what you're trying to tell me is that your dad refused to validate you. And all his life, however successful, he's been looking for his dad to validate him.
Yes.
And now he has to validate himself. But until he heard the word validate, he didn't know what was missing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think the take-home message, at least for me, is we even get this on A Voice for Men. People say, you're a bunch of angry men. And the response is, yes, we are.
You're damn right.
Deal with it.
Yep, that's it.
And it is not the same thing as hostility. Hostility, well, even when I screamed "fuck you" earlier, that was not even that's a sentiment, not a literal "I'm going to go get you" or whatever. I get that a lot. I remember a few weeks ago I wrote an article entitled "Fuck You, Kate Harding," saying "fuck you" to a whole bunch of other people, which is not my normal style. People who read A Voice for Men probably noticed I'm usually not like that. And I immediately got a message from somebody who said, that could be taken as a threat.
Yeah.
To which my response was, fuck you.
I think the fuck you thing is more, don't tread on me. Don't tread on me. It's setting a boundary. It's saying, this is how far you can go and no farther, pal. Back up. That's the way I see it anyway.
Yes, I do too. Now we have Michael back on the line, I understand. And I would like to bring Michael on if he's got a minute.
Yes. Hi. Thanks. Sorry about having to leave earlier. It's great to talk to all you guys, and I think this is a great show. Erin, I'm a Facebook friend of yours, and it's nice to finally talk with you.
Yes.
Yeah. We've exchanged a few. Yeah, we've exchanged a few messages. Yeah. I'd like to relate a short account from my life, and then go from that to a serious, difficult question that I would like you guys to see if you can answer. Okay. One is one issue that I haven't heard addressed actually a lot is the prejudice concerning violence against boys. And from my own standpoint, I had a sister that was 6 years older than me. And when I was basically from about the age of 7, she started beating me up on a regular basis. She had her own problems. We had some family problems. She was acting out, and I was the easy victim. I had been taught by television and parents and other things like that you stand up to bullies. That's how you do it. But, you know, I was a 7-year-old kid, prepubescent, versus a 13-year-old female, and I suffered a lot from it. There were a couple times I went to people for help, and basically the response I got was, well, you two shouldn't fight, and, well, a little fighting is normal, that's sibling rivalry, or man up. Something to that effect. And I have a hard time believing that if it had been a 13-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl that the response would have been the same. But anyway, it finally ended not through any external act of authorities or because my sisters got better, but because by the age of 11 I had become physically strong enough that I could fend off her attacks. She continued with verbal abuse, and then actually it escalated. Well, it culminated probably in an incident where she sexually assaulted me while I was asleep when I was about 13. And that,
wow, she was disturbed.
Yeah, she was. It was pretty bad, and that left me with some problems that I had to deal with. Took a few years to deal with. Anyway. So one of as I've tried to bring up issues of domestic violence and how it's both a male and female problem, one of the objections that comes up really quickly, okay, and my case is obviously an exception to this objection, but that comes up really quickly is, well, men are just physically stronger. They're physically tougher, okay, and yet maybe 40% of women are hitting men during domestic violence, but that's not serious. That's not a serious threat. I just wanted to ask, I know that there are incidents, there are anecdotes where men get seriously injured, but do we have any statistics about serious injuries and deaths as a result of domestic violence and how it affects men?
Well, I can tell you that in England, of the 2 women are murdered every week and 1 man.
Wow. Okay.
And in terms of serious violence, I don't know what you call it in America, but some women, and one of them showed me how she did it. She took a milk bottle, or you can have a wine glass. You crack it on the table, and then you put it in the man's face and you turn it. That's serious.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and the other one is throwing pans of hot fat at a man.
Right.
I mean, the violence, I know the violence, and I know how serious it is, particularly if both couples are fighting. Now, the woman, if the 2 of them are fighting each other, the woman, unless she uses a knife, and I've had women do that, the man will probably hurt her far worse. But the fact is they're both equally guilty. And my feeling is, as far as you were concerned, how on earth you didn't feel that you could go to your mother or father and then they would stop there's an awful lot of beating up in siblings that goes absolutely unnoticed. And terrible stories coming out of families. What happened in your family that she felt that she could sexually assault you? Was she jealous? Were you a favorite of your mother?
You
were the last child.
Yeah, I was the youngest child. Yeah, and she had a sister that was 1 year older than her, and they were really competitive with one another. And my eldest sister, who was actually really nice to me, did attack her sometimes, and she was. And my mom and dad were very preoccupied and just, they had good ideals, but they were pretty self-absorbed.
That's a form of emotional neglect, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that I think my father had an alcohol and drug problem also, though he kept it hidden.
But his behavior wouldn't have been hidden, would it?
Yeah, well, it's a big long story, and I'm not saying that she was the origin of the violence. Ultimately, I think part of the great tragedy that feminism has brought is that by looking just at violence against women, it ignores the causality, the cycle of violence that happens, that men are violent because... Oh, go ahead.
Well, it's a learned pattern of behavior,
Yeah, exactly.
And the thing is that, and whatever your father was medicating himself for, with the drugs and the alcohol, the root problem was still there. And my feeling is the tragedy is that the women coming into my refuge, of the 100, 62 were as violent as the men they left, they needed help. They were the ones that we most needed to take care of, they and their children, because they were violent to the children. Right. And my feeling is we completely ignored human violence because we have had this appalling argument about patriarchy, which is made up. It's rubbish. And we've had this multi-billion-dollar industry where on the ground floor, children are witnessing generation after generational violence. And we need to now put an end to the whole feminist myth.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. We don't have a patriarchy. We have a cycle of violence. And if you ignore one side of the cycle, you can never end the cycle.
Exactly.
And you see, nobody really talks about the children. Mostly what you hear about is women's stories of women. It's on women crying on television. Yes, they're brutalized, but the most important part is my parents had the right to choose each other. They didn't have the right to have 3 children who were born into their personal war.
Right.
And we were all free damaged.
To get a little bit back to Michael's question, Erin just gave you one answer, which is that it appears to be 1 man for every 2 women killed as a result of that. Now, there is also substantial research to suggest that that's an underreporting because women, well, she didn't get away with it, but women like Jodi Arias, who killed her boyfriend or husband, used the "he was battering me" defense. And so there's evidence that women get away with murdering their partners more often, and so it doesn't get recorded as a murder. And furthermore, in the statistics on spousal violence, if a woman hires somebody or gets a man to do her bidding to kill her boyfriend or husband or whatever, that is not counted as domestic violence or domestic violence-related murder. It's considered like a double homicide.
Interesting.
It just isn't in the statistics. So while we don't have a full picture, we have every reason to believe women killing their partners is far more common than commonly believed, and that 2-to-1 ratio of men killing women may be completely bogus. Probably bogus. We just don't know what the real number is. Well, even mention. Go ahead.
Oh, even given that ratio, it's still pretending that it's one-sided is still absurd. I mean, we're ignoring a third of the victims, and that's
And if I could add one thing, Dean, there's the Fiebert bibliography has hundreds of studies about domestic violence, and I think you'll find one of them. I believe it's John Archer. Did some research, and he came up with the idea that 38% of all very seriously injured people in domestic violence are men.
38%?
Yeah. That's because women use weapons.
Yeah.
Hold on, everybody. 38% is what Tom just said. Go ahead, Tom.
Yes. I think it's John Archer did that research. The other research you might want to look at, I don't know if people know about this, is Denise Hines has just done some absolutely fantastic stuff around domestic violence and men. And she did this one survey where she surveyed all these men who had gone to shelters and gone to the domestic violence places, and she's got statistics on what they were told. And it is mind-blowing. I mean, like 60% were told that they were the problem. 30% were told that they don't help men, that men are actually the abusers. And if you look at Denise Hines, Hines, it's just fascinating stuff.
Great. I'm just Googling both of them now. Hines. Okay, great.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you very much, folks.
And we're going to get to some other calls here in a second, but I'm going to take this as an opportunity to mention a URL I want everybody to know about and to go to and contribute to if they can. Reference.avoiceformen.com, or you can also just use wiki.avoiceformen.com, wiki.avoiceformen.com, We are building a wiki of references. Tom Golden just said the FIBR bibliography. That's on our wiki under primary resources. It's a list of hundreds of studies with links to the original source material you can check for yourself. In the domestic violence area, that is in there. Hundreds of studies are in there. And that wiki is still growing, so we are looking for more contributors there. You just have to sign up for an account and then send Strix, the administrator, a note saying, I want to actually contribute and write on it. We want your help with that. Now, Peter, we have somebody named Peter who's been on hold. Can we bring Peter on, James? Peter, are you there?
Hey, guys, how you doing? Yes, I sure am.
What would you like to talk about, Peter?
Well, I wanted to talk about emotional abuse. I've been involved with the men's rights movement for about 10 years now. And, you know, the thing that really brought me to the movement was the emotional abuse that I suffered at the hands of an ex-girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to you?
There was no physical component to what was happening. But, you know, I've been brought up in a manner that was, you know, you've got to protect women, you've got to defer to women, you've got to, you know, women have been oppressed. I had no reason to question any of these ideas. You know, I'm relatively young. And what had happened to me was that I'd been involved with a particular girl where it got to the point where anything could set her off. And, you know, that I think you guys have been talking about, you know, physical abuse as well, but I think it's worth mentioning the emotional side of things as well. You know, the relationship that I was in, every time something happened where she would lose her temper or she would lose control, I felt that I must have been the one who failed. It must have been my fault because, you know, she was unhappy. I was the man, therefore I must have done something to set her off.
Correct.
So what happened when she lost her temper? What did she do?
Look, it would often be shouting. It would be, you know, going to her parents or her friends and, you know, socially assassinating my character. You know, making sure they all knew how much of a rotten person I was and how I wasn't seeing to her needs.
Would you have found it more Can I ask you something? Would you have found it more acceptable and easier if she'd actually blacked one eye so you could say to somebody, look what she did to me? Because trouble with emotional abuse, it's like soul murder, because the bruise will go away, but the words often stay.
Well, you know, if she had hit me, it might have been more of a clue, to be honest, because I put up with it for about 2 years. Yeah, I mean, I put up with it for about 2 years, and things reached a head, and I think this is a very important story for other guys to hear. And I've told it a number of times, but never on the air. Things reached a head when she came home drunk from one of her cousin's weddings one night. Now, just to be clear, this was not a habitual thing for her. She was not habitually drunk. I mean, people often get violent when they're drunk. This was not a habitual thing for her, although it happened occasionally. But she came home drunk one night from her cousin's wedding, and she'd said to me, oh, you know, I'll be home around 11 o'clock, you know, midnight. Please wait for me. You know, we were not living together. She'd asked me to wait at her parents' place for her to come home. Anyway, I got to about 2 or 3 a.m. and she finally came home, and she should definitely not have been operating a motor vehicle, but she got home and I carried her drunk behind upstairs, you know, only to find that she was sitting there, you know, messaging some other guy on her phone, and generally everything she was sufficiently out of it that she wasn't doing a particularly good job of hiding what she was doing. And when she passed out, I had a look at her phone to find that everything she'd been saying about me to whomever it was she was messaging was horrific. You know, I was beating her, I was raping her, I was a horrible person. You know, I mean, it was, I wanted to throw up when I read what was on her phone. I mean, we can talk about violation of privacy, but to be honest, my curiosity got the better of me. But, you know, I still felt like I was the one who had failed. And what really pushed things over the edge was, you know, people talk about snapping psychologically, and I think this is the most important part. Mm. One morning, not long after this, she came down from her room, this two-story house. She came down for breakfast. It was about an hour after I'd woken up, and I immediately tensed up. I could feel this stress, this kind of like something was gripping my heart in my chest, because I knew that she was going to lay into me as soon as she woke up. And I immediately engaged all of these little rituals I'd developed to avoid setting her off. And I suddenly realized, you know, I was about to eat some fruit. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but I was about to eat some fruit, and I was trying to make sure, look, I know this is going to sound insane, but I was trying to make sure that my teeth didn't touch the spoon I was using because the sound annoyed her.
No,
and I suddenly
not
snapped. That's right. It wasn't healthy, and I suddenly realized I literally snapped. I was in the kitchen, and I suddenly laughed this insane laugh, and I still, 10 years later, remember it so distinctly. I realized that what I was doing was literally insane.
Yes. Well, you're placating.
And
that's
emotional abuse.
So much to try to. Sorry, go ahead.
But you couldn't fix her, could you? You can't. You can't fix somebody like that. But you did try.
No,
I think you were fitting the typical male pattern that we are talking about here. I don't mean typical male pattern in a shameful way. You were fitting it, though. You were accommodating yourself to the woman, because that's what men tend to do. Sorry, but it is.
Mm.
And you,
absolutely.
I'm guessing, you were saying you felt it was your fault. I would think that at the root of that, you were thinking you could fix it somehow.
That's right. You know, it was my job to. Yes, I hadn't done enough to accommodate her. I hadn't done enough to look after her. It was my job to look after her. If she was unhappy, it must be my fault. That makes perfect sense, right?
I think most normal people, when they're faced with somebody that they love and can see is psychologically or whatever damaged, there is this great need to nurture. You obviously had a need to nurture her, which in the end, in a sense, you got fixated and forgot that you too are a person with rights. You gave her all your rights. And then you snapped, and hopefully that was the beginning of you beginning to see more clearly.
And I'll tell you something.
Well,
not in a feminine way, but we blokes do not get credit for the fact that actually men naturally are very nurturing creatures. We just do it different.
Yes.
But anyway.
Yes.
So when you suddenly saw the light, tell me, what did you do next?
That particular day, I was still in college, as you would say in the US. I went off to college, went off to my classes, and, you know, it sort of, I felt like I was shell-shocked for the whole day. And then on the way home, it suddenly hit me, and I cried in my car for about 2 hours. When I arrived home, I just sort of sat out the front of my house and just cried for a couple of hours, not completely understanding the situation I was in. But after that, I began to emotionally disconnect from her, subconsciously, I think, realizing that I had to put an arm's length between me and her, and the relationship didn't last more than another sort of 3 months. I forget the exact period of time. It was 10 years ago, but it was between 3 and 5 months, I think. and I gradually sort of disconnected from her. And, you know, to be fair, her parents were wonderful people. You know, her mother was lovely and kind and caring, and, you know, her father was what some people might refer to as a self-made man. He was, he was wealthy, but it was not wealth that had appeared overnight. He'd entirely built it himself. I think he'd felt that I might have been able to take a place in the family business. He sort of seemed to be interested in moving me into that, but I realised that I couldn't stay because every day, once I sort of emotionally disconnected and stepped back, I was able to see that things were not going to get better and that things were getting worse day by day. And her mother actually said to me not long before the end, she said, "I don't understand why she's such a bitch to you."
Was she Daddy's daughter?
In a sense, yes. I mean, her parents had thought they would never be able to have children, but then she came along.
She sounds as though somebody spoiled her very badly and gave her no boundaries so she could do what she liked.
Peter, I really want to thank you for sharing. Go ahead.
Oh, no. I was going to say, Erin's probably right. There was probably a lack of boundaries there, but
you can see it.
Certainly not as bad not as bad as. No, go ahead.
Peter, big important question, because I think we're out of time. Is have you been able to make a good relationship since?
Yes, I have. I have been able to put myself first. You know, to recognise that I enjoy other people, enjoy having a partner, but to be able to put my needs first. So, yes,
put each other's needs first works best, actually. She puts your needs first, you put her needs first, and that's usually a very good partnership. Well done, anyway. You learned out of your experience, and it hasn't made you bitter, which is fantastic.
And, Peter, I really want to thank you for sharing. I really want to thank you for sharing. We have some to get to. But there's a very powerful story, and I think more men need to hear it. In fact, I've seen the relationship that Peter just described on the other side. I've had more than one male friend who was on the other side of that text conversation that Peter's girlfriend was doing, sobbing to him about how her boyfriend or husband was beating her, raping her, treating her like garbage, and the man believed her and got his heart torn out because he thought he could fix this woman who was playing damsel in distress, and he was going to white knight her and help her because he believed her. And it's an important, it sounds cruel, but it's true. If you hear a woman telling you a story, you don't necessarily say you're a liar, but you really should be cautious because there are some damaged women out there, and we shouldn't be afraid to say that.
Yes. Dean,
now, yes, sir.
I have just something I wanted to add for Peter here, and that is a plug for Dr. T's site, where she does a lot of work with men who are responding to women who have had personality difficulties. And if you want more information on that, you might want to check her site out.
Dr. T, he's talking about Dr. Tara Palmatier, and her site is Shrink for Men. That's shrink, 4, men.com. She specializes in men who have gotten themselves into dysfunctional relationships and don't know what to do. And she's terrific. She's awesome. And her forums are worth it, and it's great. Now, Iron John, one of the best MRAs I know, men's human rights activists I know, has been waiting patiently on the phone for 18 years. John, can we please bring you online?
Well, it hasn't been quite 18 years, Dean, but thank you very much for your compliment. It's very thoughtful. I wanted to address Erin for a moment. Tom, I'm not going to ignore you. I'm going to bring in your opinion, but
I like being ignored. It's okay, buddy.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm happy.
All right. since last time we spoke, I've been thinking about something you said, and a light bulb went off over my head. Now,
John was on our last show. John, you were on our last show. That's what he's referring to. Go ahead, John.
You had said that one of your great frustrations in working with men was that you could not get men to care about each other. Is that an accurate reflection of your sentiment?
Yes. I mean, I do think there are very good personal relationships between men, some men. But the more difficult question is really, why is it when there's this huge groups of women across the world meeting as feminists, why is it that virtually no men's groups have anything like the kind of power that women did? And they don't. Each time you work with a men's group, so often you watch it absolutely fall to bits because they don't care enough about each other to actually sync their differences and work together. And I think it's partly biological. I think because men, in a sense, women network very easily over emotional issues, but men don't. Men network over all sorts of other projects, whether it's financial or building or whatever. But when it comes to their private lives, they find it so incredibly difficult.
And you have some thoughts on how to overcome that, John?
Yes, I do. Erin, I spend a lot of time talking to men online, and the one thing that comes up again and again is low self-esteem. I think that in this age of feminism, one of the things that men have been taught is not to like themselves.
Yep.
To be ashamed of themselves simply because of their gender.
Yep.
And then this in itself has probably been a big part of your problem, because if you think about it, if a man feels he is worthless and the most important person in the world to that man is himself, what does he think about other people, other men? What are they worth to him?
Yeah, I can see that. And also, I do think that for most men, love their mothers very passionately, and then when they get married, unfortunately, they channel all their emotions, all their relationships through a woman. So they define their emotions through their relationships with a woman. And when she's abused them and tortured them and brought them to their knees, they find it very hard then to turn around and look to other men for help. Because traditionally, men look to women for emotional support, don't they?
Yes, they certainly do. The silver lining to all of this is that if there's some way, and I do have some crazy plans on how we can do this, but I don't want to give them out over the air because not everyone who listens to this program is our friend. I think that if there's some way we can work with men individually and get them to raise their own self-esteem, their own self-worth, that eventually, maybe not too long later, they'd start to notice the value that other men have, and then it would be only natural for them to want to reach out and help those other men and work together instead of not doing that.
Yep.
Because they won't
Tom,
be worthless anymore.
Tom, are you still there, Tom?
Yes, I'm here. I'm nodding my head in agreement.
Yeah, I was just going to say to you, one of my problems is that, you see, the violent relationship, the man, and the dysfunctional relationship the man's in, very often isn't the source of the problem. The source of the problem goes back to his relationship with his mother. And if she's being dominating and a bully and abusive, he tends to become extremely submissive. And then when he grows up and he moves off to a violent woman, picks a violent woman like his mother, he then assumes that same, as you say, John, that's exactly what happens, because his sense of being nobody, no sense of self, comes way back from being a child. Does that make sense?
Yes, because men are mostly externally focused. They are not really focused internally. They are focused on the outside world, trying to conquer, trying to explore, trying to learn. So their sense of self or identity or worth is far less developed, I would say. Simply
but
because
then again,
they haven't
validation.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. I would just say that women, on the other hand, do get to have that internal focus on their feelings, and they have a society which is at the moment reinforcing their worth. Not only reinforcing their worth, but elevating them, perhaps artificially, while at the same time doing the opposite to men. So it's no wonder that you couldn't get the men to work with one another.
Of course. I agree 100%. I think that men are institutionally devalued. And any sane man is probably feeling bad about being a man right now if he lives in the United States or Canada. And it's just crazy how we're devaluing men. And thank you. And we need to find ways to help men feel good about who they are. That's the whole essence of the men are good thing for me. I think this is so critical that we help men to kind of own who they are and to love it. Because men are really beautiful beings, but we just don't see that because we're comparing them with women in some way. It reminds me of the civil rights movement in the United States. What was the first thing those activists did? They put the phrase out there, black is beautiful. Black is beautiful. And they did that because blacks had been just torn down by the research, by the media, and by all the stereotypes of the general public. They'd been torn down just to think they're nothing. They're nothing. And that's the same thing I think men are facing today. We're seen as nothing. And we've got to start from the ground up. We've got to start building up men to feel good about who they are. Men like Danny Boy today. What is he doing? He's hooking his healing in with his activism. That's a beautiful thing he's doing. And I meant to say that to him when we were talking about it. It slipped my mind. And it's this kind of thing that if you look at men in a slightly different way, you go, wow, that's a wonderful thing. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yes. I know. I've got grandchildren and I've got great-grandchildren and I've got a wonderful son. And but the most important thing for men, and I think we have to start in schools because it's an awful problem for boys in school. There's a lot of school teachers who really start damaging little boys when they're very young because they don't like how boys behave. They want them to behave like girls.
Yeah. I think that, John, you've issued a clarion call there that needs to be repeated. We have another caller we're going to get to here in a minute, but men are good, and I remember it both stung me and healed me a little bit the first time I saw one of the Men Are Good videos from Tom Golden here, because I realized I'm 47, so I grew up. I'll be 47 in July. I grew up in the wake of all this cultural misandry, and it was almost shattering when I realized I hated men and I hated being a man.
Yes.
There was something inherently wrong, and I had internalized that since I was a small child. Yeah. And it didn't even really, I would even say nasty things about men because I had internalized that negativity to myself. And it made me feel a little better to dog on and dig and belittle men because, well, that would at least make me better than them. But ultimately, there was a self-loathing I'd inculcated from the beginning simply by being a man, and all of a sudden just saying, being a man, what a wonderful thing. What a piece of work is man. How beautiful are we? We are, goddammit.
Indeed.
And it's saying that we're just not like women. That doesn't make us better than women. It doesn't make us worse than women. It makes us different. My horse is nothing like my dog. Dogs and horses are both beautiful things. Yes. There's nothing wrong with my horse being a horse. There's nothing wrong with my dog being a dog. There's nothing wrong with my wife being a woman. There's nothing. We're different, and it's okay. And men are awesome. We really are. We're creative. We're thinkers. We're constructive. We do things. We're awesome. We really are awesome. Damn it.
Indeed.
And I have another caller on the line, Ian from Australia. Ian, are you there?
I certainly am. How you going, mate?
Hey, good to hear you today, Ian. This is the famous Dr. F, by the way.
Oh, wow. Hello, Dr. F.
Erin, mate, how you going?
Fine. How are you?
Really good. It's good to see your shiny face here on Skype.
I can't see you. Yeah.
I know. I'm covering my face. But the thing is, You know I love you, don't you? Now, the fact is that when you come here and stay with me, you've got to stay on the couch, but after the second week, we've got to split the bills, okay?
I do own on a couch. I have to have a sumptuous suite with champagne.
Oh, fair enough. I'll do some phone calls. Dan, you're welcome here, but after the first week, you've got to start paying, mate.
Okay, well, that's fine. Remember, Erin is a high-maintenance woman, so you've got to treat her right, mate. But
this is a great show. This is. I don't often call in to the Blog Talk Radio, but I felt absolutely compelled tonight. If anything, just to, I guess, relate a story that happened to me some years ago. And this is still, I was still in my, I wasn't in my blue pill days. I guess I was in my purple pill days. Okay. Definitely not a feminist. But anyway, with my wife, we'd gone to a party. One of her workmates had had their birthday, and there was a bunch of us outside with a bonfire. Lovely environment. Everyone's getting on well. And I was talking with this woman I'd never met before, and she was pretty intense talking about something. And then, as all intense conversations go, they run their volition to an end pretty quickly. And I said, well, look, it's been nice talking to you. I just think I want to, go and circulate. So I turned around, and then as I turned around, she gave me a hell of a wallop on the side of my ear. Almost bloody well knocked me out. It was incredible. Anyway, so I was dazed, and I stood up, and I couldn't believe it, and a few people had seen it. And my wife was obviously very upset. And I said, look, this is just appalling behaviour. You just assaulted me. How can you do something like that? And before I knew it, there was a crescent moon of people half surrounding me. And they had had their hands on their hips. And basically, what I was faced with was this is a very arresting moment for me. It crystallised something in me. Mm-hmm. I saw a whole bunch of people all looking at me, and every one of them was scowling, or all of their eyebrows were like the letter B, and they were just castigating me, saying, "Well, look, give the woman a break. She's got some problems, and what did you say to her? Did you hit her first? All this sort of stuff." I just couldn't bloody believe it. Now here's the thing. I left the party. Well, actually, I was told to leave. So I left. And I thought, right, I'm going to go and call the cops. I've got to go to a police station and talk about this, right? So there I am with my wife, and she's crying, she's upset. I said, no, it's okay, it's bloody well hurt, but I'll live, sort of thing. We'll just have to sort it out. And she's crying, and she says, no, I'm really upset because when I go to work tomorrow, they're going to hang shit on me, and we were chucked out. It's so embarrassing. I couldn't believe it. And so I was trying to find a police station, and I spent quite a while trying to find one. And my wife was actually getting into a screaming match with me, saying, "Look, let's just go home. Let's go home." And I was determined to find a police station. I did. I go in there. I said my story, and the policeman there very politely leaned over the counter and said 3 words. He said, "Just deal with it." Yeah. And they were laughing. Now here's the thing. It occurred to me then that there's something really bloody rotten in the state of Denmark, isn't there, mate?
Yes.
Yes.
You flip this stuff around and you have a woman going in there and she's been plopped on the side of her head. Is there going to be anything like that kind of reaction? No, there's not.
No, you'll get arrested.
No, absolutely astounding. Absolutely astounding. So my marriage, that actually was the beginning of the end for me with my marriage. I thought,
if she didn't defend you. She didn't defend you.
No, she wasn't there for me. In fact, she was the opposite of being there for me. She was pushing me away. She was upset.
She was upset on her own behalf because somebody might give her trouble at work, and she felt embarrassed. She didn't. Her automatic feeling should be that she go back and tell the woman off.
I know, but the amazing thing is, here's the amazing thing. The amazing thing about that story is that it's not amazing. It's actually, I'm guessing that's a pretty standard thing. That is the thing that, for me, is catches my breath, So, I mean, right now, I'm in a relationship with a woman, but I'm very, very much NTGAW. I said right from the beginning exactly what I want, what's going to happen, and what I expect from her, and all the rest of it. And that is how you do it.
But she was also hopefully able to be exactly as honest with you about how she feels.
Absolutely, it has to be a two-way street. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
You
well, that's it. And the two of you, do you like each other?
Absolutely.
Do you trust each other?
Absolutely.
Well, there you go. Well done.
That's
absolutely.
It's very good to say, and Ian, I'm going to underline that point you just made. The thing that is amazing about your story is that there's nothing amazing about it.
That's
happens
right.
every day.
True.
It happens every day.
Oh, it's true.
I've seen this 1,000 times. Just like I was saying earlier with the caller Peter about how his drunken girlfriend was texting all this horrible shit to some boyfriend she was cheating on him with. I have no doubt in my mind that man on the other end of the receiving end of those texts believed every word without question. I've seen cases where women get violent or abusive and the man gets swarmed on. It's almost in response to her being nasty, or they laugh. And I think it's about time we stop finding these things amusing. They're not funny. Yes. And we need to start seeing women as rational adults who need to be held accountable for their own behavior, which is what, by the way, feminists claim to want all along, but haven't delivered on in 40 years.
Mm-hmm. Pardon me, just a moment here. IJ, you still on the line, mate?
No, I'm afraid he's not.
Oh, okay. I thought he was. Yeah, go on, Dan. Sorry.
No, that's all right. We're just running short on time here, so I want to start wrapping up. But I really appreciate your story. It meant a lot to me. And, in fact, I would like to start wrapping this show up.
I'll sign off now, and thank you very much for listening to me. See you later, Erin. See you later,
Lovely
Dan.
to talk to you, Ian. Bye-bye.
Good to hear you, mate. Bye-bye.
We'll see you.
Now, what I'm going to do is ask our guest, in a second here, I'm going to ask our guest if he has any parting thoughts and to promote his site. I'm going to mention to people a URL, earlsilvermancenter.org. Hope I just spelled that right, earlsilvermancenter.org. If you want to get help, want to help in establishing a real men's shelter, it's going to be called the earlsilvermancenter.org. Please check that out. Please check out memoralondon.org with some articles there recently touching on these topics from Erin, from some other people. We're going to have some more stories on A Voice for Men, of course. Tom, parting thoughts?
You know, Dean, the one thing that I wanted to say is that the differences between men and women, I think Erin has touched on a couple times, are definitely at least partly biological. And we know now that there are biological factors involved. And, in fact, it's become more complicated because 17% of women have the same biological factors as men, and 17% of men have the same biological factors as women. So it's like you can't pile all men and say all men do it one way and all women do it another. It's much more complicated. And we didn't touch on that before, so I wanted to kind of at least end with that to let people know that we're not thinking it's a man-woman thing. It really is a biological thing, and we've got a lot to learn. And, Dean, I really appreciate you having me on today. It's been fun.
Thank you so much.
I hope you come back.
Well, I hope so, too. It'd be good to come back. You just let me know.
Yeah, I'd love to talk some more with you.
The URL to your site, again, is?
Yeah, the menaregood.com is one, and thewaymenheal.com is another one. And, of course, the Men Are Good YouTube channel.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much for being our guest and our resident expert on The Way Men Heal, Tom. Beyond that, I want to thank everybody who called in this week. I want to remind everybody that we are doing this every 2 weeks, every other Saturday in this same time slot. I also, I'm doing this out of order, but I want to emphasize, we do talk about the way men heal and the way women heal. Tom said 17% of women do it the man's way and 17% of men do it the woman's way. I don't know how accurate plus or minus, just roughly. So if you've been listening to this and you're a woman going, I act the way he's describing, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you, lady.
Exactly.
And if you're a man who's going, no, don't stereotype me, I need to talk about it, okay,
right,
that's cool
exactly.
too.
That's exactly the rub, Dean. Thank you.
And but at the same time, we should recognize that the majority of men and women are a certain way, and there's nothing wrong with that either.
Yep.
Erin, would you like to take us home with some parting thoughts?
My parting thought is hopefully more people will come and join us. Look up the site, mralondon.org, and if you would like to write something for us, you'll see instructions in the top right-hand corner. Just click on and let's know your views. A voice for men, and have a good, loving, kind to each other week.
Hey guys, learn to love yourself and love each other. James, cue the outro. You have been listening to Domestic Violence Revelations with Erin Pizzey and me, her co-host, Dean Esme. Our show's opening music and closing music is known as Sunshine and Eternal Hope, respectively, and is by Kevin MacLeod and used under Creative Commons Attribution License, with a link in the show notes. We also want to thank James Huff, Tom Golden, and Paul Elam, and all of those who are part of the A Voice for Men community for their support for this show. Remember, if you're a victim of domestic violence, no matter if you're a man or a woman, gay or straight, adult or child, no matter what your race, your ethnicity, your religious views, your sexual orientation, or anything else, what you went through or are going through now is not okay. You should not be afraid to talk about it with people who understand and care. Just remember to talk to people who do understand and not to ideologues who fear the truth or will marginalize you and your experiences. Remember, the truth about domestic abuse is often painful to hear, especially to ideologues, and especially to those who've been through it and been marginalized and ignored. But remember, in truth, there is hope and healing. And we hope you'll be a part of helping to spread the truth and the healing. Please join us next time on Domestic Violence Revelations with Erin Pizzey and yours truly, Dean Esme. God bless.